Hello there, Alaskans, wherever you are. Welcome to the Must Read Alaska Show. Coming to you from somewhere in Alaska. This is the place where we talk about, you guessed it, Alaska. Where we keep the mainstream media on their toes and where we are standing up for what's right in a world run by leftists. You can find out more by heading over to mustreadalaska.com and also checking out the Must Read Alaska YouTube channel for some really great content. But first, let's get this party started.
Well, welcome everybody to the Must Read Alaska Show. I'm your host, John Quick, coming to you live from somewhere in Alaska. And boy, we are excited for a little rain here on the Kenai Peninsula. Hopefully we'll get some of that dust down. We finally have almost melted all the snow at my house. The snowmageddon, the snow drama is almost over. There's just a teeny little patch in the backyard, and I cannot wait for it to be melted. And on a lighter note, I want to thank everybody that listens, watches, and reads Must Read Alaska. We do this to spread conservative news through all the nooks and crannies of Alaska. And we're just excited to have another show. For those of you that want to help support Must Read Alaska, you can go to mustreadalaska.com. And on the right-hand side there, there's a little donate button. You can click on that. Every $5, $10, $100 helps, keeps the lights on here at Must Read Alaska. We're not funded by some dark web money nonprofit conglomerate. We're just funded by everyday Alaskans who care about having an alternative news source. So if that is you, thank you so much for helping. And without further ado, we have a very special guest today, Rick, who's the director of Power the Future of Alaska, which is an awesome organization that is pro-resource development. We love having him on the show. Thanks so much, Rick, for joining us on the Must Read Alaska Show.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity, John. It's going to be a fun couple of topics today.
Yeah, so you're kind of, a lot of folks, you have a radio show that talks about resource development. A lot of folks look at you as kind of the resource development expert, and you've been kind of charged with that. And Power of the Future has been a great organization that helps, be a positive advocate for things that people in Alaska care about, which is let's create some resources here and get some dang jobs going. One of those projects is AKLNG. It's a fascinating project to me. Excuse me. It's could be one of the biggest projects in the world. Talk to us a little bit about what your thoughts are on the AKLNG project. Now it's AGDC. There's been a bunch of different acronyms, but essentially it's this huge natural gas project that Alaska's been talking about for 30 years. Give us your scoop and your genie in a bottle predictions on this, if this could actually happen or not.
Well, first of all, I love this project, right? You have 100+ trillion cubic feet of natural gas stranded right now up on the North Slope. And, we hear all the time about how Alaska could be facing an energy shortage from LNG in Cook Inlet, although I think there's some fallacy to that rumor. I think that's, put out there by the people that want to see us transition away from LNG to less reliable, more expensive sources. But AKLNG could solve all that, John, and it could give an opportunity for Alaska to enrich itself with exports to the Pan-Pacific region, where they also need LNG as a good, reliable source of fuel and power. So, AKLNG, $43 billion. It has almost $30 billion of federal loan guarantees. I had Frank Richards, who's the head of AGDC, on my show just last week, and you can catch that on soundcloud.com. If you want to hear that full interview, just search for Power of the Future and look at last week's show. But, he was on the show talking about the things that have happened here recently with the Biden administration. The Department of Energy had asked for a pause on the project so that they could look at a couple of things. And just a couple of weeks ago, the Energy Department came out and reaffirmed the export plan for AKLNG. Nice. That's huge, because certainly if and when it gets built, and we're going to think positive here, John, and say it's going to get built, it will, the export plan will be what enriches Alaska. Aside from that first take that everybody talks about, giving Alaskans gas for, again, heat and power all the way up and down the rail belt. That export will be what drives the revenue creation from the project. And so when Frank was on, he talked about the fact that the Biden loan guarantees in the Inflation Reduction Act are huge, as is the reauthorization of the export plan. Here's what I think is so exciting about this project. Number one, 2,500 to 3,000 construction jobs. It'll be the largest construction project since the pipeline.
Yeah.
A couple hundred, 300, 400 full-time jobs after that. But it's, again, 100 years of Alaska's gas for Alaska's use to take care of any, concerns that anybody has about running out of fuel and then having to revert to renewables, which, let's be honest, don't work and won't work in Alaska the way that the eco left wishes they would.
When the Tesla battery, God bless Tesla, but when the Tesla battery only lasts 20 minutes in a car in the dead of winter, it's doesn't have much high hopes for changing the game here in Alaska.
No, it's a really tough road to hoe, right? If you're part of that whole just transition movement, we really don't need fossil fuels anymore. Well, first of all, you're not ever going to get to green, and I use that in air quotes, without exponentially increasing mining, and you're not going to get to green without a whole ton of burning coal, because coal's the only thing that makes steel. It's the only way you forge steel. And all of these green projects need steel in order to happen. So, again, the hypocrisy and just the outright dishonesty of the left when it comes to quote unquote going green is laughable. And we try to expose that idiocy with Power of the Future. And, again, I think we do a pretty good job.
I think it's hilarious when somebody shows up to maybe a public meeting and they're wearing their Patagonia gear with their with their MacBook laptop, and they've driven there in a Subaru, and they have Nikes on, and they're protesting further oil exploration. It just cracks me up.
Yeah, I have a shirt that says "I love fossil fuels." It's made out of cotton. It's pretty funny because I could have probably gotten it printed on polar fleece or some sort of synthetic, but I think it's really funny because it's so it shows the dichotomy between reality and the hypocrisy, right? Oh yeah, we hate fossil fuels in the just transition movement, but you use them every day. We hate mining, but you'd rather enrich China. I know we're going to talk about China later on, John, but just again, the eco left's walking their talk is non-existent in most cases.
So what do you think on a scale 1 to 10? Do you think this project's going to actually happen? Give us your prediction.
They need about $150 million to do the feed assessment. And then, once the feed assessment's done, then they find a full investor for the rest of the project. That feed assessment timeline is the next 14 to 18 months. I think they get through that pretty easily. I think they'll find an investor willing to help put up the $150 million. Again, the project has a lot of push from the Biden administration. Rahm Emanuel has kind of taken the lead on that. Dan Sullivan, Lisa Murkowski, Mary Peltola, all of them, Governor Dunleavy, all supportive of the project. Again, once you get the Biden administration on not walking their talk, right? We hate traditional energy, but we love Alaska LNG. That's great for Alaska. They get through feed. Then I say it's probably 60-40 that it ultimately ever happens.
Nice.
I'll take 60-40. That's better than what it's been for the last 3 decades.
Yeah, that's better than what former Speaker of the House Chenault was saying, 5 years ago. Now he's pretty excited about it. Now that he's back, he's back on the AGDC board, and there's a lot of good players that are involved now. And like you said, most of our elected officials are for it. So man, if they ever had a shot of making some headway, I think now's the time. So,
well, yeah, John, and here's the biggest difference, right? Public perception back when Governor Walker was in and trying to give away Alaska's riches and Alaska's power and Alaska's control and Alaska's finances to China, that was never going to fly. And again, it's just another faux pas from the Walker administration. Thank God Dunleavy and AGDC board are doing it the right way this time, which is enriching Alaska first and not worrying about the communist Chinese.
Yeah, I like the way the governor's doing it, and it's no nonsense. And he only talks about things that are happening as opposed to, 27 press releases a day under the former governor. So,
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about let's talk a little bit about Trump. So, because I think Alaska's been under the thumb of Biden now for a couple years. Looking back on Trump's 4 years in office, what kind of a score would you give Trump for being pro resource development and for being pro Alaska?
Donald Trump is a 10 out of 10. He, I'm older than I want to give myself credit for. I grew up, my first foray into like knowing about politics was Reagan. So, everything has been couched as how did it look? How did this president compare to Reagan? And Trump on energy policy, strongest I've seen. Trump on pro Alaska, strongest I've seen. The only thing that Trump failed on when it came to Alaskan energy policy was not getting Pebble through after he said there would be no politics in it, right?
Yeah.
But really, truly, what he and his administration were able to do to advance domestic energy prosperity, domestic energy independence, domestic energy worldwide dominance, I'm not sure we'll ever see another president make those kind of strides again in my lifetime.
So when folks, I think some people get discouraged and they think, well, I'm not even going to care about getting involved or even voting because the president doesn't really affect me. I mean, do you think it's a fair argument that we could point to Trump as an example and say, listen, it actually does affect you, and here are some positive ways that he actually affected Alaska?
Well, I think you can look at what I just said about Trump and then take the 0 score out of a 1 through 10 with President Biden as the polar opposite, right?
Yeah.
Biden has come up with 52 executive or administrative orders directly tied to Alaska resource opportunities. 2 of them may be considered wins. AKLNG, although again, there's still a lot of room that need, things that have to happen for AKLNG to come to fruition. And the so-called win around Willow, which certainly I counted as a win. But the other 50 decisions that Team Biden has come up with, John, have thwarted, hurt, stymied, delayed resource development opportunities in the state. 2 for 52 gets you sent down to the minor leagues in baseball. 2 for 52 gets you cut off of a sports roster. Heck, 2 for 52 in an everybody plays league gets your kid in the bottom of the last inning just for an at bat because you have to. Yet that's what Team Biden is saying are wins for America. I totally disagree.
So Trump's got a 10 out of 10. Biden's got sounds like maybe a 0 out of 10.
Yeah, 0.
What can Alaskans do? We got a president that's, in your opinion, a 0 out of 10. Can we contact our elected officials? Can the state House and Senate do something? I mean, what should the average Alaskan do that's sitting in their couch or sitting in their car listening to this thinking, well, shoot, I might as well just give up. We got a 0 out of 10 with Biden. What can they do?
Well, so first of all, thank God we only have 2 more years left of the 0. Unless America is stupid or masochistic, one of the two. But here in Alaska, continue to get involved at the local level because all politics is local, and make sure that things like utility boards, assemblies, school boards, although we're not talking energy policy with schools, although they are, if you get the right school board, they don't teach that, there's a climate crisis in your 3rd grade classroom.
Yeah.
Because that's debunked. But, getting involved at a local level, continuing to let your legislators know that you support responsible development, that non-binary choice, where we can have it both ways between responsible development and environmental stewardship is important. Letting the governor know that we support, most of what he's doing, right? The fight for 404 primacy that Jason Bruni and others are fighting for, where we would control the wetlands permitting process and not have it be held hijacked by environmental extremists in career bureaucratic roles in the EPA, for example. That's a big deal.
Yeah.
It takes money. The state legislature has waffled around on whether or not that's going to get funded in this year's budget. I think the final, at least what's coming out of the Senate today, is that it's going to get mostly funded. But again, working to make sure that people know that this is this is really the cornerstone for Alaskan industry. A quarter of all Alaska private sector jobs are directly or indirectly tied to oil and gas. All of state government is paid for by oil and gas, whether it's direct royalties, John, or whether it's that amazing investment of the permanent fund, which is really driven by state royalties to begin with, right? Yeah. So the majority, 70-80% of the state government is paid for by the oil and gas industry. It can't go away. There's too much opportunity. There's too much mining opportunity. And again, we'll get rid of the zero at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue here, hopefully soon.
Yes, let's some of these Biden policies are just crazy, and some of these wanting to go green policies that are affecting cities across America are crazy as well. I think the city of Seattle just banned, maybe last year or the year before, any new construction cannot no longer have natural gas in them, and we've seen making the news, folks, natural gas stoves could be banned down the future. Talk to me about some of these just crazy policies coming from the left that seem to be living in the metaverse as opposed to the real world with all the rest of us.
Yeah, it's a great point, right? So we've already seen Congress push back on eco-left stupidity. So now Team Biden just figures that they should just executive order everything into existence. Jennifer Granholm, right before Christmas last year, was speaking, and she said, we have over 100 regulations that we plan to implement related to household, everyday living, appliances, and things like that. And not everybody kind of picked up on that. We did at Power of the Future, and we were like, 100? Holy cow, what's going to happen next? Then you heard about the gas stove ban, John. And you've seen cities like Berkeley and Seattle and New York, a lot of those, blue-led cities come out with regulations to try to stop the climate crisis, right? By enacting all these traditional energy measures. But look at what Team Biden has done since December. They've come out and said, gas stoves, bad. Dishwashers need to use less water and less energy. Well, the National Manufacturing Association for Appliances has said, look, when you took it from 5 gallons of water per wash to 3.5, what you did when you did that was take the average wash cycle from an hour long to almost 2.5 hours long. That's how much longer it takes to wash your dishes now versus 10 years ago. So are you really saving the environment and saving the planet when you use 2.5 times longer duration, more energy, more electricity to save 1.5 gallons of water? I wash my dishes twice sometimes because no matter whether I soak them or whatever, they don't get clean. You're seeing that with hot water heaters. You're seeing it with dryers and clothes washers now. They're reaching into all different parts of our lives. And I don't know about you, John, but I don't know who in government is an expert in manufacturing of appliances. And then I don't know why government shouldn't just let the free market work and let the market create the efficiencies rather than having them mandated from on high in Team Biden.
Yeah, the famous quote from Reagan, I think, I'm here from the government
and I'm here to
help. You should be very concerned about that statement.
Well, even our founding fathers, right, in the Declaration of Independence pointed out the fact that they were writing this document in part to save America from superfluous regulation, right? And that's not the exact quote, but inane regulation isn't the government's to give you. The government is to do certain things, life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. It's not to regulate you out of your dishwasher. I just don't understand why the eco left thinks that that's the right approach to take when there isn't a crisis that, necessitates it.
So do you think this is things that the governor and our state house should be fighting against? Do you think they're doing enough? Do you think they should be doing more?
I certainly think that the problem with the legislature is always budget focused, right? Almost every year we get into the end of the session and there's this big fight about the budget. There's a fight about retirement systems. There's a fight about power cost equalization. There's a fight about how to pay for base student allocation increases. Pushing back on idiocy in the federal government is really the job of our congressional delegation. I think they do a good job of it. Certainly Dunleavy does a good job of pushing back. Treg Taylor has joined other attorneys general and other secretaries of state to push back on Biden's idiocy. But, again, America needs to be vigilant and Alaskans need to be knowledgeable. And, they can get information from people like Suzanne and you who do a great job of disseminating that. They can get it from us, powerthefuture.com, or on Twitter at, PTF Alaska, or at Power the Future. I mean, we try to expose climate hypocrisy, eco-left stupidity, and regulation that harms America at the expense of jobs and opportunity.
I like that. So let's turn the pages for a second and talk about Willow, because I think this is a kind of a fascinating project for folks. If I were to ask my neighbors or friends about it, most people that I talk to kind of think it's a political football. And so I'm curious to hear your thoughts on the project, if you think it has some teeth, or is this just something people are going to use for the next 7 election cycles to potentially win or lose an election?
First of all, I think Willow is an amazing project, right? It never should have had to have gotten reevaluated by the Biden administration, except for the radical environmentalists that are embedded in that administration couldn't let a fossil fuel project go without fighting it. But let's talk about Willow. 180,000 barrels a day. It's over a third of what currently goes through TAPS coming out of that one project. It's a tremendous opportunity for Alaska. We talk about AKLNG and the opportunity between Willow and Pika, 250,000 barrels a day. Think about that. That's a 50% uplift from what's currently going through TAPS every day. Now, Willow, I said earlier in the show, Willow was a partial win. Yes, Willow got approved, but it was 3/5 of the original scope, right? Instead of 5 drilling pads, Conoco was limited to 3. They had to give back some other leasehold land in order to appease the Biden administration. And then the biggest loss in that, again, it's a win for that actual project, but at what cost? Because Biden, by executive order, withdrew opportunities for 15.8 million acres in the NPRA and Beaufort and Chukchi Seas as part of that trade-off that he tried to appease the eco-left with. By the way, they went apoplectic because the quote-unquote carbon bomb of Willow is a real project, and those 15.8 million acres are, vaporware right now, right? I look at it the other way. Win for ConocoPhillips to be able to produce 60% of what it wanted, but who knows how many jobs, how many opportunities, how many billions of barrels of oil or trillions of cubic feet of natural gas were set off limits, by the way, in the National Petroleum Reserve here in Alaska. That's a congressionally mandated area, and Biden locked up, 40% of it.
How big a deal do you think it is for our 3 delegates to be kind of on the same page with this and fighting towards one goal, as opposed to, everybody being on a different page or book about it?
I think certainly, I think it's good that Peltola, Sullivan, and Murkowski are all in sync. I think it's great that the legislature passed House Resolution 1 unanimously, right? I think it's great that the governor supported it. I think it's great that labor supported it. Very rarely do you get all of that synergy, right? The voice of the Arctic and Inupiat. Everybody kind of came together. The vast majority of Alaska, again, believes in responsibly done development. It's just the fringe, small pockets of society that think that we can't do it well, we shouldn't do it well, and we need to just transition away from hydrocarbons in some utopian fantasy world of theirs.
Yeah, it doesn't quite work like that, I don't think.
No. Go back to your comment about they're wearing their Patagonia, using their iPhone, and driving there in their Subaru, and they want to get rid of fossil fuels.
Yeah, if somebody walked to a public open meeting it with a burlap sack on and it took them 4 months to get there, I'm going to listen to that person. But they show up in there.
Walk the talk, guys. I mean, like,
I was at a oil, I think Blue Crest here on the peninsula this is like 3 or 4 years ago, and there was literally somebody in like some sort of burlap sack outside on the highway protesting and didn't have any shoes on, and I was like, I'm gonna listen to that guy. he walked here from somewhere and he has no shoes. And he's got like a parka on.
It's great. John Kerry, I'm gonna throw a John Kerry story in here really fast, right? Guy owns multiple mansions, multiple cars, multiple private jets, and he's the biggest climate hypocrite. He and Bill Gates, right, are the two biggest climate hypocrites probably in the US, if not the world. Oh, we need to divest. Well, I buy carbon offsets every time that I travel privately because that saves the planet. No, it doesn't, John. Carbon offsets and carbon sequestration and carbon everything is just another way for a person with a guilty conscience to try to assuage their guilt, period.
So let's talk about China and the US. I think a lot of Alaskans started thinking about this when Walker was trying to sell off the LNG kind of plant to China. I remember at one point, because I was the chief of staff for the Kenai Peninsula Borough when that was happening. I remember at one point there was talks of having all the labor for building the camp come from China. And I don't know if that ever made it out into the public sphere, but I remember being in a meeting talking about that with public officials. And so I think, people get worried about those kinds of things, and a lot, us just normal everyday Alaskans. Talk to us about China's kind of involvement with the US kind of at our own expense, and if that's good or bad in your opinion.
Well, it's horrible, right? I mean, so we have seen China over the last 30 years decide that they want to be the global superpower. They have a Belt and Road initiative where they're building everything, right? They're opening up 2 coal-fired power plants a week.
Jeez.
In China right now. 2 a week. Why? I told you, almost all manufacturing can be more efficiently done with coal as your heat source rather than any other type of power. If you're going to make steel, if you're going to fuse solar panel layers together, if you're going to manufacture a lot of electronics, coal's the way to do it. And so China could give a rip about the environmental consequences of world domination, right, John? They own the supply chain for everything from pharmaceuticals, and we saw the damage that was being done, during COVID, right? Where they said, "Oh, wait, U.S., Europe, we need our pharmaceuticals, we need our N95 masks, we need our respirators, and I know that you guys need them too, but we're going to take care of China and our allies first." That's why people like Ford and MyPillow and all the distilleries, President Trump was able to get them to, change up their manufacturing and start building respirators and PPE, and all the distilleries started making hand sanitizer.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, because I think a lot of people forget that. Like, we didn't have any of that stuff. Like we didn't because
we counted on China.
Because we don't make anything in the US anymore. We didn't have those super fancy hospital things and the PPE and the masks and even just hand sanitizer. Nobody was making hand sanitizer. Trump had to step in and make it happen. And had he not done that, we would have been up the creek without a paddle.
Oh yeah, and so then let's think about this, right? Pharmaceuticals, medical equipment, military technology is majority made in China. U.S. military technology, not made here, made over there, and now they make almost 80% of the world's green energy components and panels and wind turbine blades and everything like that. So as we, and I say we, meaning the talk about transitioning away into renewable solutions, first of all, I think it's laughable. Second of all, it's more expensive. Third of all, it's less reliable. And fourth of all, it empowers the communist Chinese because they make 80% of the world's technology. They manufacture 80%. So why would we give them and cede control of our energy grid supply chain to China? But that's what the left wants to do because we're not making it at home and we're not mining it at home. We can look at Pebble, we can look at Twin Metals up in Minnesota, we can look at Avikwame down in Nevada. We can look at all these opportunities for domestic mining gone awry and gone amok because of the eco left's insistence that mining is bad for fish, for the environment, for whatever. We're not mining in America. We're not manufacturing in America.
What do you say to the person who thinks, yes, we've won something because the mine in Minnesota is not going to happen anymore? This mine's now going to be in some third world country with no regulations. Talk a little bit about that, just to paint a picture of this is going to happen somewhere in the world. It might as well happen in the U.S. where we're at least enjoy playing in our rivers and streams.
Yeah, well, first of all one has to do is look at the river colors in China, right? They're orange. Yeah. They're polluted. The last time I checked, the U.S. doesn't allow slave labor, but China does. The Congo does, where a lot of the lithium is made. Child labor. People as young as 6, 4, 5, hand mining lithium in the Congo under Chinese control, by the way. So the Chinese government has gone in and paid off the warlords in Ghana and the Congo to allow slave child labor to by hand grab chunks of cobalt and lithium, wash it in a mercury solution, and load it by hand into burlap bags that are then drugged to the processing facility. And yet that's progress because we can't mine it in America under the strictest OSHA regulations, under the strictest environmental regulations. That's what the people who say no Pebble, no Twin Metals, no Avikwame, none of that, that's what they're empowering, and that's what they're actually championing. Instead of made in America, mined in America, manufactured in America, let's kill gays and lesbians in these countries. Let's use child labor. Let's enslave political prisoners and put them to work in some of the most horrible working conditions. And we somehow call that environmental and social progress. It's kind of sick, but that's what the eco left would rather have us do than make it in America. America
produces energy very friendly to the environment. The most friendly, you think?
Oh, by far. There's studies out that show that we have dropped our emissions over the last 20 years by almost a quarter. We've done it through fracking. We've done it through increased use of LNG. We've done it through free market economics and free market innovation. Now we're starting to take steps backwards, right? Where we're getting government mandates instead of ingenuity driving the market. But for the last 20 years, we've dropped our emissions in the U.S. No other country, in no other first world country can claim as big a drop as we can. By the way, the EU's tried, but they've gone away from things like nuclear to wind and solar, again, given control of their grid to China, given control of their LNG to Russia. And then this last year, when kind of the crap hit the fan, they were looking at energy costs, John, that were 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times higher year over year than they were the winter of 21, 22. 22, 23, had it not been a warmer than normal winter in Europe, people would have literally died because they couldn't have paid their power bill.
I picture Europe with those like Danish windmills trying to make it happen.
Yeah, last time I checked, that's not a very good. I mean, we saw that in Texas, right back in February of 2021. ERCOT, the Texas Regulatory Commission, basically went wind happy, and then they had a freeze, and the wind turbines froze, and people died. A couple hundred people died in Texas, of all places.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
the U.S.
People were
That should never
starting.
happen.
People were starting like campfires in their house, in their living room floors to try to keep warm.
That should never happen in America, but that's what we're headed towards, right? We're headed towards rolling blackouts. We're headed towards an electric grid that isn't going to be able to control or keep up with demand, especially as you take things that are run on natural gas and move them to electric. Heat pumps, water heaters, stoves, cars, right? As you plug all of those in and transition away from gas, and these leftist locations push this narrative that we have to get off gas and get on electric, and we have to make the electric all renewable, you're forcing your grid to be overburdened, and that's not good. We've seen what's happened in Europe. We've seen what's happened
Well, even in
Texas,
California, they
California, right?
can't handle the Tesla grids because the Tesla cars draw more power. If every person on your street's got a Tesla car, that's drawing more power than their actual houses are.
Well, here's the idiocy, right? And I know we're going to run up against time, but if you're in a big city and you're in a big apartment complex and you're in site condos and you're in multi-family, multi-dwelling housing, where are you going to plug in your Tesla? Most of this parking in big cities is in parking garages and on the street, and sometimes you have to park 3, 4, 5 blocks away from your home and walk back home because that's the closest place you can get. I have friends in Boston. I have friends in New York City, and that's exactly what they do. They literally park blocks away. Do they have a Tesla charger if that happens 3 blocks away from their home? Or is the parking garage that they park in at their 700 apartment complex building got to come up with 700 Tesla charging stations in the parking garage? No. Number one, the grid wouldn't hold it. Number two, it would be practically impossible. And number three, people, they're going to break. And then what happens to yours when it breaks? You're going to go use your neighbors. And it's going to just be a big cluster. But again, this is the world that the eco left somehow thinks is progress. It's poppycock.
It's kind of just dumbfounding, but this is the world we live in and we got to keep fighting. That's how I look at it. So I'm sure that's how you look at it too. That's why you're doing what you're doing. Let's talk a little bit about Pebble. I think when I talk to people about Pebble, just in conversations or around the dinner table or something like that, it's mostly negative. It's rolling their eyes. It's, gosh, this thing's never going to happen. That seems to be the biggest political football that, has been used as of recently. Here in Alaska, going back and forth with giving it a chance, never going to happen. Give us your thoughts on Pebble and kind of where we're at, and if you think it's got a chance still.
I still think it has a chance. I still think that the world needs Pebble. So I was on the Bob Bird show on Voice of the Kenai here 2 weeks ago, and we spent 45 minutes on Pebble, John. Here's why he wanted me on, and here's why I will give you the very abbreviated version of that, right? There's $1 trillion of copper, gold, uranium, molybdenum in that mine. That's known. I'm sure there's more than that. $1 trillion worth of asset. If the world really wants to go green, and again, we can debate the merits of that, but if there's this push to go green and a push to, start using less hydrocarbons and a push to go electric and all this crap that's going on in the world today, you need 17 pebbles by 2050 to be open and producing copper. 17 pebbles. If you shut down the biggest one that's known in the Western Hemisphere, what does that say for your chances to find 16 more that are somehow going to get opened up, right? So the other thing about Pebble that I think is absolutely mismessaged by Pebble is that they have a clean environmental impact statement. Pebble didn't get preemptively vetoed because of the science. The science was clear. In the final environmental impact statement, 53 times in that 1,100-page report, and I've read it cover to cover a number of times, they talk about the fact that Pebble and the Bristol Bay fishery coexist beautifully. Little to no impact to the Bristol Bay fishery in the worst case scenarios. Like, worst case scenario, it has a minimal impact on the Bristol Bay fishery.
And
Realistically,
this is
zero impact.
FERC saying that. This isn't some oil executive saying that.
Right.
This is the most regulated regulation arm of the United States government saying this.
This is the NEPA process, the National Environmental Policy Act, which even the NRDC, who fought Pebble left and right, says is the Magna Carta of environmental law. They called it the Magna Carta of environmental law. It's the process that gave Pebble effectively a clean bill of health, scientifically. So why did it get stopped? It got stopped on politics. It got stopped on really, really bad public backlash to an environmental group secretly taping Pebble executives called the Pebble tapes. And what was said was that during those tapes were abominable and abhorrent and out and out lies and braggadocio. And Pebble deserved every bit of public and governmental backlash that it got on that. But you can't override the fact that the science is clear that it's a good project and it's a safe project and it's a $1 trillion project. It's 600, 700 full-time jobs, 2,500 construction jobs, and a generational opportunity for people of the Lake Iliamna area that they don't have. They're not fishermen by and large. It would be generationally changing, just like Red Dog did to the Northwest Arctic Borough, or like Prudhoe did for the people on the North Slope Borough. It's generationally, 60, 70% of the people in that area are below the poverty line.
So what's the next step for Pebble? Because I think people are just, including myself, confused. What does it do from here? Does it need more money? Does it need more permits? Does it need this? What does it need?
Yeah, it needs to win in court. It is going to go to court to fight the EPA appeal, or the preemptive veto. They're going to appeal that. They also just got a win from the Army Corps of Engineers Pacific Command, which is based in Hawaii, which looked at the decision to deny the permit from the Alaska Corps and said, we don't think that was factually based. We think it was politically based.
Good.
Go back and look at it again, guys, and take another look at it and look back at the science instead of the political shenanigans that went on. Right? Again, the science is clear. If the science is clear, John, and the politics got in the way on what should be a non-political process, I think Pebble wins that appeal. I think Pebble is given the opportunity. Now, they still have to overcome the absolute politics of an EPA veto, which has only been done a handful of times in EPA history. But I also think that the zero in the White House goes away in 2 years, and you hopefully get a more responsibly development-centric president. You have Governor Dunleavy on state. By the way, that whole project's on state land. Yeah. It's $1 trillion of state asset. Dunleavy should be fighting for that. The legislature is going to be split because people like Bryce Edgman hate Pebble. Lyman Hoffman's not a big proponent, but people who don't live and die by the lie of Save Bristol Bay, and people who actually look at the science and don't look at the fear over facts narrative, like Save Bristol Bay and the Alaska Center and everybody else has been trying to put out about Pebble for 15 years. The science is clear. Pebble should happen.
So is the future bright for Alaska? Are you hopeful that Alaska's better days are still ahead of itself?
So we underwrote a white paper through ICER at the end of 2021 that showed that Alaska's mineral potential could be as much as 5 times greater in the next 20 years than what it was currently. So what it was at the end of 2021, if you were to get the right regulatory environment, you could have a 5x impact on the state of Alaska from what it's doing now.
Nice.
ANWR, Willow, Pika, awesome opportunities. And there's more, Moose's Tooth and other projects, right? Lots of opportunity there. The West Sioux Access, the Ambler Project, all of those are job creators without environmental damage. I've been in Alaska now. I was born here, raised outside, came back. I've been here since 1987. I think our best days are ahead of us. And that's from somebody who's been here for, a long time, 36 years.
Nice. So tell folks where they can find, they're going to listen to this and be like, I got to figure out this. I got to read more about what this guy's talking about. I got to listen to what he's saying. Tell folks where they can find all your stuff at.
Sure. So we're on powerthefuture.com. That's probably kind of our main hub of content. We also have a YouTube channel. Just search for Power of the Future. My radio program is on every Tuesday, replayed on Saturday. Suzanne Downing's going to be on tonight, by the way, everybody. You can listen to that at 1020kvnt.com, or if you're in South Central Alaska, on 92.5 FM or 1020 AM on KVNT. You can follow me on Twitter at PTF Alaska or the organization at Power of the Future. We're on Instagram, we're on Facebook, both under Power of the Future. Again, if you just Google Power of the Future,
you can find it.
You can find it. And we're pretty, for a 3-person organization, I think we punch way above our weight. We'll pop out 2 or 3 national op-eds a week between the team. And, we fight for America's energy jobs, America's energy opportunity, and against this narrative that's completely fabricated that America's best days are behind it, and that we need to get away from what has made America great from an energy perspective, which is hydrocarbons. There isn't a need to make this rushed transition when really those jobs, there's 10 million Americans that work in energy creation. The vast majority of them are in rural America. Why would you want to harm our most vulnerable areas?
Well, any last minute thoughts here before we head off?
Appreciate the opportunity. I mean, certainly what Must Read does for the political dialogue in the state is incredible. We're happy to be partnered with you guys. And, I think that people who care about Alaska, who care about Alaska's future, who want a better tomorrow, need to support both of us with clicks and listens and shares and everything, because what you and Suzanne and the team do is needed. And I know that the best job I've ever had in my 30 years in business is this one, because it makes a difference for everyday Alaskans each and every day.
Awesome. Well, Rick, I appreciate you joining us here on the Must Read Alaska show. And I want to thank everybody that listens, watches, and reads Must Read Alaska. We're going to put all Rick's information and websites and all that kind of thing in the podcast description. So if you didn't get a chance to quickly write it down, you can just look at the podcast description, and we'll have a link to Power of the Future right there in the podcast description. Rick, you're welcome back anytime you'd like.
Love to do it.
And until next time, I'm John Quick from somewhere in Alaska. Thanks so much.